This is a proponent statement for the community issue review. Let's start out by hearing more about who you are and how you're involved in this community.
Sure. My name's Scott Chambers. I grew up around this area basically all of my life. My family bleeds blue and white. My maternal side of the family has been here for 3 generations. My grandfather was involved with the formation of the art history department and many community affairs throughout his lifetime. My mother followed that same pattern and been actively involved with local government and university affairs throughout her lifetime, and that sort of rubbed off on me throughout all of my professional life as a special ed teacher for the state of Pennsylvania around here, and also as a realtor. I've always been actively involved with the communities that I've lived in and aware of a lot of the issues that come to play and help develop communities.
Great. Let's move on to some background. Can you tell me briefly about how you would define this issue that's going to be reviewed by the panel of community members?
Sure, and my understanding is the issue is really about local taxation and what role that plays in development and the quality of life that we have here in State College or in any community. I think a lot of that goes back to viewing what the role is of government at all levels, but specifically here local government, and what are we expecting from our government. I look at government as a means of providing services and protecting the rights of citizens to try to produce the best quality of life possible. Those sort of services and so on require funding because nothing comes for free. The primary avenue in which the funding comes is through taxation, generally on property taxes or maybe some sale taxes, things like that. There are some other avenues such as grants and monies from different areas that may be available, but from what I've seen over the years, the biggest single factor that impacts the quality of life is in relation to local taxes, property taxes primarily, and what you do with that has a direct correlation on what the community can then offer its citizens.
So we understand that you're familiar with some of the history of State College and this issue. Can you talk through some of the main points related to this issue that you described in your position statement?
Sure, and just real briefly on history, as I said, I grew up around here for a little over 50 years now. And because of involvement with my family and people associated with the family, I've seen how the local government operates. I shared a story at one point of having the borough council people talk to me and my friends on where to put bicycle routes. But we look at that and really begun to get a much better understanding of, I love this area. I've chosen to live around here. It has a very high quality of life. As a realtor, I've seen that verified over and over and over again in various studies. But once again, it doesn't come easily free. It requires a lot of work. It requires financing, input, upkeep, all sorts of things that come into play. And so this issue becomes the foundation of what we like.
And would you say that also speaks to the main reasons why you're advocating for this issue and why it's important to the community right now?
Sure. As I said, I love this area. I see a lot of it changing as the population grows, as technology brings around changes in our society, not only locally, but on a bigger level. I also see an interesting discussion going on nationally, regionally, locally about the role of taxation and what the role of government is. I think sometimes people get caught up in sound bites and campaigns that sound really good on the surface, but don't fully understand how that relates to their homes and their properties and the communities that they live in. Taxation is a really tricky one of those things because there are many things that are provided through taxation funds that we take for granted. And there's been this big movement of, sounds good, I don't like to pay taxes, there's no doubt about that. I would prefer not to pay taxes. But I like having buses available, I like having safe communities that I can walk around in, I like having a good educational system. You look at fire halls and police services that are now being spread out to regional areas and the services aren't as available. So I think it's important that we really look at what is the role of taxes, what is the role of government, and why it's important not only for me to talk about this, but for everybody to talk about this and really get a better understanding. I don't know if our educational system gives us the background and the knowledge to really relate to these things. It's easy to get caught up in the sound bites and the campaign promises and things like that, but we don't fully understand. Many of the cuts in federal taxing and funding that went on several years ago is trickling down now to the local communities, and why you're seeing communities looking at having the need to raise taxes to provide the same services that they used to get from money that came from the state or came from the federal government. And as we see that source from the other levels of government dwindling or running into roadblocks and hesitations, by default what happens is each local community then has to either provide those services and maintain the quality of life that we've enjoyed, or we live without it. And unfortunately, it's really through taxes that is the best avenue to try to address that. I wish some of these other sources would come back so there wasn't as much pressure on the local communities, but the reality of it is, for now, we have to take a look at what do we want in our communities and how are we going to provide for it. So this is a very relevant issue.
Are there any additional documents, resources, or pieces of information that you suggest that panelists reviewing this issue be familiar with in order to understand it fully?
I won't go through the whole list. I think the panelists obviously would be wise to check with things like the borough, Public Works Department, talk to the police department, some of the services that provide infrastructure, roadways, traffic studies. Look at some of the utilities. Around here be the State College Borough Water Authority, the University Area Joint Authority. Looking at information on, in regards to the police, what has changed over time in regards to the amount and type of crime that has occurred around here. After living here for 50 years, I've noticed a big difference. Well, they would have the statistics. We have older, almost antiquated systems for our sewer and water that need to be addressed. Also, the changing nature of our society, the increased use of technology and mobility, are things that the borough is looking at. We're dealing with water runoff issues, so there they could find more information, direct information on what's happening within the community and what the borough wants to do to try to address that, and probably a good understanding of what some of those costs are, and get some real hard facts and data that would help somebody decide whether it really makes sense to keep taxes current with the rate of inflation, or do we need any increases or cutbacks.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I love this process. I think many people feel our voice doesn't count. Yes, you can vote, but that's only periodically. I think there are a lot of people that have thoughts and feelings that they don't feel heard and don't get to express, and getting the citizens a chance to discuss this, I think, is a wonderful idea.
Thanks so much for your time.
Sure, my pleasure.